Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video. And in today's video, we're going to be going over the ban and announcement that just came out through LSS website, and man, is it insane. I mean, goodness gracious, y'all. Like, it crazy. We'll get into it. Before I get into my objective content creator, really want to stay, as even on the line as possible. I'm going to get a little like personal, not in a bad way, but in a good way for a second. And thank God Belittle was banned. Thank God. The card should have been banned 2 sets ago. The card should have been banned during the Starvo chain time frame. It breaks the fundamental rules of the game when it comes to cost. I understand people loved how efficient it was, but it basically allowed people to shortcut when creating decks. And overall, I'm glad the card was banned. Thank goodness. Love it. Love it. Love it. Anyway, back to objective content creator standpoint, right? So the ban suspension came out today. This ban suspend announcement was originally scheduled for the 30th due to the proximity of the call in Indianapolis taking place on February 7th and 8th. We're bringing this announcement forward a little bit to give people enough time to make changes before Indy. Before dividing into the changes, we want to note that we actively consider removing cards from banned suspended lists as a way to manage the formats, and you can expect some ebb and flow of cards in and out of legality over the coming months and years. Basically, they're giving themselves a little bit of grace in order to take cards off bans or suspensions if they so see fit, which is fine. So Classic Constructed, Belittle, banned. Winter's Whale, banned. Amulet of Ice is suspended until Icelander becomes Living Legend, and Hypothermia is suspended until Icelander becomes a Living Legend. We'll get to those in a second. We'll read the rest of the article of why they did this, and then we'll talk about thoughts and stuff. So in the most recent ProQuest season, hero representation in our game has been very diverse, which I agree. The majority of our heroes showed up to events showcased a wide array of play patterns and challenged 4 and 1 Pro Tour invites. Despite this diversity, 3 heroes dramatically outpaced the field in terms of conversion rate, win rates, and total number of Pro Tour invites secured. We talked about this in a prior video, that Oldheim's top 8 conversion rate in week 1, and I'm going to be interested to see how week 2 looks, but in week 1, Oldheim's top 8 conversion rate was 50%. That means half of all the Oldheims that entered into the meta got top 8, which is unbelievable. So really, really insane. If this were the first season of dominance from Oldheim, Icelander, and 5, perhaps we'd be inclined to look the other way and allow metagame time to adapt. After all, we are not in a 3-deck metagame, and none of these heroes have play rates that are problematic. The overall representation is not problematic, and that's true. The issue with it is, I think, and one thing that we're looking at is, like, Oldheim was 5th in overall representation in week 1, but was 1st in conversion. So, a deck that was like, it made up 7% of the meta, then turned around and made up like 14, 15% of the top 8 meta, like unbelievable conversion, something like that. So that's the reason. So simply put, Oldheim, Icelander, and 5 have been on top for a long time, and all 3 ways of obtaining Living Legend status. It is time to change the Classic Constructed format. So going into it, so Winter's Whale is too strong of a one-hand guardian weapon. Tales of Aria represents a set where boundaries were pushed, and as we learn more about Flesh and Blood, it's become increasingly clear that Duskblade was not the only majestic weapon in Tales of Aria that went too far. I will say this about Winter's Whale. I guess we'll do one at a time as we're talking about it. So Winter's Whale was surprising. It was a surprising ban. Was not expecting it at all. I personally thought the best way for them to hit Oldheim, if you're sticking to the class, the best way to hit Oldheim would have been Crown of Seeds, but I understand why they don't want to ban a legendary equipment piece. I thought that was kind of the way that Oldheim kind of cheated the system in his deck and was able to be very flexible and do a lot of different things, right? Like off Tunic, basically being able to cycle a card, have 1 damage prevented no matter how the damage is coming at you, unless it's a Shuko trigger, and just unbelievable value. So I understand. That's where I thought they were going to go if they went anywhere, even though I didn't think they were going to do it. Winter's Whale is insane. As they say here, many two-handed weapons like Othos, Romping Club, Nebula Blade, Sledge of Eldheim, Winter's Whale basically has the same impact that those two-handed weapons have. And when you think about Winter's Whale solely from a from a value perspective. It's a one-handed weapon that's a 2-for-4 on-hit frostbite. So for a one-handed slot, you are able to attack for 4, which is very high for one-handers, and it creates a frostbite. So it creates disruption and attacks for a breakpoint, and you can have a shield along beside it. So it's just really, really nutty. When you think about others being able to carry stuff like Rampart, Stalagmite, Bastion of Eisenloft, and Arcane Lantern, there needs to be meaningful costs to play a one-handed weapon, given how much value your offhand provides for Guardian. Because the issue is not only is Winter's Wail technically above rate for a one-handed weapon, it severely above rate, it also can be paired with another above rate one-handed offhand, which is like their shields. So Winter's Wail is interesting. I will say I'm not a Guardian connoisseur, but it does put Oldheims in a really weird spot because now they have 2 options. They either can run Titan's Fist as a one-handed and keep their shield, or they have to run a 2-handed hammer, which then eliminates their shield. And if you get rid of a shield with Oldheim, it changes the entire deck. Now decks like Azalea and Bravo and even Phi can deal with Oldheim a lot easier because he cannot efficiently block. Before counting Crown, Oldheim could, without committing an actual card, he could just keep pitching. He could literally block 1 damage from shield, 1 damage from Crown, and 2 damage from Earth React, right? So 4 damage without even giving up a card, technically, right? And could just fatigue people out. So not having that possibly, or having to choose between a stronger weapon or that, is going to be really hard for a Guardian. I do see, honestly, Guardians keeping Titan's Fist and just going straight fatigue. I don't know how you do anything else, because if you play a Nothos with Oldheim, he's basically a worse Bravo. I mean, he really is. He's a worse Bravo. So I don't know what they do here. I think Titan's Fist with shields the only viable option right now, and then they're going to have more tankier builds, but we'll see how it is. But it definitely affects it. I mean, the Phi matchup is a lot worse now for Oldheim, a lot worse. Shoot, even the Katsu matchup is worse for Oldheim if they choose to keep the shield and do Titan's Fist. They can still pitch, they can still block as efficiently, but they can't come back at you very much, right? It's just the value you were getting is pretty insane. Then we get to the part which really surprised me the most, honestly, which is Hypothermia and Amulet of Ice. So Icelander has not quite been as dominant as Oldheim this season, but as our world champion has proven, there is nothing scarier to see across the table than the great player behind a waning mood and the Ice Wizard. Icelander's effective game plans into virtually every hero, which I agree, in the format, except for Jeremiah is really hard, but even then, it's not unwinnable. It would be challenging to bring the deck back to the field with only a single alteration. Therefore, we're targeting someone for best tools for both aggro and control matchups. With Hypothermia and Arsenal, Icelander feels virtually invulnerable against decks that rely on bestowing Go Again to their attacks. With a single free blue card, turns are routinely stolen. Hypothermia can undo multiple turns worth of setup by planning by an opponent. I do agree with that. I don't think Hypothermia was an insane game changer. It doesn't really affect Phi. It doesn't really affect... It affects Katsu pretty substantially. It affects Dash substantially. And it affects Viserai substantially. It affects Briar substantially. So it did do a lot. And that's where I think the biggest problem with Hypothermia, and why even I saw some people calling for it to be banned, is because by playing 1 card, they can literally stop a turn. By playing 1 card, just 1. And it's pretty nutty how they're able to do that, right? So I do understand where they're coming from with Hypothermia. The crappy part is Icelander's counter already was hyper aggro if they could push through that little bit of disruption, and now you just made it even harder. So that's really interesting. Likewise, Amulet of Ice, Icelander to sculpt a perfect opportunity in late game to very little deck building cost, almost no output cost given that is free to play and has Go Again. The fact that Amulet of Ice is routinely part of Icelander's plans against aggro as well as control really tells you all you need to know about its power. When it's still worth playing a card with no block value against extremely potent offensive strategies, there is really no risk-reward proposition around Amulet of Ice. It's simply a reward. We much prefer if Icelanders that wish to set up the card denial game plans are forced to do it at a higher cost on something like the back of Insidious Chill. We expect these suspensions to last until Icelander attains Living Legend, but we will check back at a later BNS. So Amulet of Ice is interesting. It takes more setup. I don't think they needed to get rid of Amulet of Ice, if I'm going to be completely objective here. I do agree that its combo is insane. Late game, I actually had this happen in my Pro Quest on Sunday as an Azalea. It was late game. It was like 6 life to 4, 6 life to 3. They had an Insidious Chill on the board, and what they did was to kill me. I attacked with one attack that basically was threatening lethal, trying to keep cards in hand. I kept 3 cards in hand before attacking. Like super did what I was supposed to do. 2 of them were reds. I think one was a yellow or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But basically what happened was they played Amulet of Ice out Arsenal at instant speed. Give me a Frostbite. Then they played Storm Striders and with an Insidious Chill on the board. Then they played Storm Striders. They played Ether Ice Vein, and they fused it. So then on the stack, they triggered Insidious Chill, which caused me to pay 2 or discard a card. So I discarded a red. Then that at instant speed, they cracked Amulet of Ice, right? Which maybe paid 2 or discard a card. So I discard my other red. And then they hit me with Ether Ice Vein. Chilean Ice Vein, Ether Ice Vein, and I had to pay 2 or discard a card. So I paid 2 against the Arcane, but after that, like, I had no cards in hand. So they essentially ripped 3 cards from my hand off of playing 1 card that costs nothing to play, and they gave me a Frostbite. So, and they killed me. So, granted, it's like one situation. It's not like the end-all, be-all to that situation, but it's just giving you an idea of, like, there is a power to Amulet of Ice, because it's basically, if you can fuse anything in your hand late game, it's essentially a free make them discard a card for no reason. So I understand that, but I probably still wouldn't have gotten rid of it. I don't think it was that insane, but I get their reasoning, and I trust LSS that they know what they're doing with this. And then we get to the creme de la creme. Thank God. Belittle. Despite taking multiple strong anti-aggro tools from the format, we have no desire to just hand the castle over to Fi. There may be fewer Frostbites in the future, but the absence of Belittle should mean that the ones that do show up will be more effective. Furthermore, removing Belittle lowers the ceiling of Fi's output by producing virtual 6 to 7 card hands. This ban also directed long-term at the health of Flesh and Blood. It's generic. It's too easy for aggro decks to default Belittle Minimalism as their foundation. And when they do so, the unique nature of heroes is de-emphasized. Belittle Minimalism as a resource engine also diminishes the unique elements of Flesh and Blood game system and deck construction considerations. That's where I'm going to stop here. Belittle needed to go because it broke the fundamental rules of the game. As a Fi player, if I have Belittle Minimalism in my deck, I can essentially run like 9 blues or 6 blues, 9 blues, because every Belittle in my hand is essentially a blue. That's the way you look at it. So if you're running 9 blues, your Belittles count for 3 blues. So that's 12 blues. You can basically cut. That's a really simple example, but you can basically cut corners in deck construction. And one of the whole selling points from a mechanics perspective of Flesh and Blood is its resource system. The fact that you can block, pitch, attack, or utilize every card in your deck. You don't have a mana system. You don't have lands. You don't have anything like that. It is literally, you use the best of your ability for everything. And so deck construction is really important because of that. So I like that they did this. It broke the fundamental purpose of the game, one of the fundamental elements of the game, which is resource management and deck construction, and I'm glad they did it. The card should have been gone back when Chain abused it. Briar's abused it. Katsu's even abused it pretty well. Fi has absolutely destroyed it. The card needed to go. It was pretty nutty. So that card has not been fair or good since Benji used it back when Benji was being played. So the trade-off between impact cards and cards that produce resources, Belittle, fetching, and blue minimalism allows decks to cheat their resource space, increasing threat density, output consistency, and leading to less instances of interesting game states where players have to make the choice with blue-rich hands. This is the kind of variance that adds the dynamic ebb and flow to gameplay we like. Variance doesn't allow you to even participate in the game. Is kind of a variance we are opposed to. So I'm super happy that they did that. It needed to go. They have a thing in here on Crown Seeds. Notable for its absence in the ban's spin announcement, Crown Seeds deserves its own discussion. We are not blind to the fact that a tremendous part of Oldheim's power lies in the card filtration and damage prevention of Crown Seeds. Certainly, in many scenarios, Crown Seeds would have hit the bench in Classic Constructed some time ago, much like it was in the Blitz. It is in the Blitz format. However, we recognize what the legendary acquisition means Process beats the Flesh of Blood player. Many of us at LSS still look back fondly on our first legendary we ever opened from a pack, and we use them as our decks happily and proudly, taking every opportunity for your opponents. We take the bond between a player and legendary seriously. That's not to say we'll never ban a legendary card. We will always do our best to the health of the game, but we exercise a great degree of caution when it comes to legendary bans, and we absolutely view them as a last resort given internal testing, as well as cards released in Outsiders. We believe Crown Siege should remain part of the Classic Constructed at this time. I will say this. I trust LSS. If they know what cards are coming up and it's going to help, then yes, that's fine. I will say if they got rid of Crown Seeds and Winter's Whale, Oldheim would be dead as a hero because they couldn't even fatigue properly, right? It would just be unbelievable. So I understand why they did it. I do think Crown Seeds deserves a ban, and the way I read this, I'm not like getting super negative here. I'm just saying I don't like the way this reads because it's basically saying the card should be banned, but we're not going to ban it because we don't want people to be upset about having a useless legendary. I get it. I understand it. I don't think that's a good enough reason or excuse. If they truly have tested it internally and it's not an issue, then it's not an issue, and I trust LSS. However, I don't think that this is a valid enough reason, personally, in any sense. But to each their own. That's my opinion. I'm not going to harp on it. It's just my thing. This ban suspension announcement was originally scheduled for January 30th. So there's a living legend check in conclusion of ProQuest Season 3. In the unlikely event that Briar or any other hero happens to cross the 1,000-point threshold in the final weekend of ProQuest, she will attain living legend status as this announcement was made on January 30th. Blitz, no changes. The next scheduled announcement is March 20th. So 2 months from now is the next scheduled ban suspension. So basically post right before Outsiders, I guess, is their whole purpose. So overall, belittle, W, thank God for banning that card. Hypothermia makes sense. I'm okay with it. I think Icelander's kind of in a weird spot now personally, but we'll see. Winter's Whale is insane. I really don't know what to think about this. I understand that I know it's definitely going to hurt Oldheim, but we'll have to see how bad. Definitely unexpected. And then Amulet of Ice, I don't have an opinion on. I don't think they need to suspend it, but to each their own. But so overall, it's definitely going to shake up the meta. The meta is going to be super wide open still. I don't think it's going to change, like make decks unplayable or anything like that. I think it's going to I personally think they hit the top 3 heroes and brought them down a rung. And in a meta where we already have a very wide and diverse meta, this should, in theory, on paper, work and help. So, what to see. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. Overall, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with where the game's at. The game is in the healthiest meta state it's ever been, in my opinion, since I've been playing at Monarch. So, we'll have to see if that continues. But, yeah. Let me know what you think. If you like this content, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Join the Discord down below if you want to, whether you're a Ninja player or not. Doesn't matter. And yeah, I'll be seeing y'all next time on TCG Talk. Thank y'all so much.